I'm being told that we can go on. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for a briefing by Ambassador Nebenzia on the program of work of Security Council under Russian presidency in October. We will start from an opening statement, then I will open session for questions and answers. Ambassador, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Fyodor. Dear colleagues, it is a pleasure.
Can you take the mic, please?
I think it's on. This way? This way I cannot read, you know. It is a pleasure to see you in this room. It's been a long time since I've been here. You are scattered and you are not plenty, but I know that we are being followed on, through a VTC. I would like to give you a traditional briefing of the presidency of the Security Council for the month of October. We succeeded presidency of Niger, which was testing, but everybody noted today was at our presidential breakfast and between ourselves, amongst ourselves, that Niger did it fine, and it did it with grace, I would say. And it went through stormy waters, which we experienced during this month with flying colors. Today was, in a way, well, I hesitate to call it this way, but it was a historic event. We finally went into the Security Council chamber after nearly 7 months of absence. We were approaching it for a long time already, starting, I think, with the German presence in July. Germany was a strong advocate to go back to the chamber. There were some obstacles on that way, but we were accumulating support as we went, and by the end of September, the support was overwhelming, I would say. Look, we are not, of course, reckless. We understand the risks. We are planning to uphold necessary, reasonable, and feasible precautionary measures in the chamber. The agreement was that, of course, we will wear masks, and besides that, we will have partitions between the delegations that we volunteered to make. We made a sample one today. We tested it. We were recommended by the Secretariat how to adjust it, to extend it a little bit, the length of it. And I think by the 8th, we will be able already, on the 8th, for the first time, we will go to the chamber for an in-person meeting. And before that, we will be holding in-person meetings in the ECOSOC chamber. And, of course, we will be holding VTC meetings, especially on the open debates. And that is justified because for the open debates, there may be a high-level turnout, and the high-level turnout provides for the high-level people to be delivering their statements from the outside. Now I would like to give you a brief outlook of what we're having in this month at our program. We start tomorrow with the adoption of a draft resolution, extending inspection regime off the coast of Libya. That is Security Council Resolution 2240 on illegal migrations. And later we will have consultations on the UN Disengagement Observer Force, briefed by ASG Khaled Khiari. The second week of our presidency, which starts on the 5th, will be a VTC meeting on Haiti in the morning, and an in-person meeting in the ECOSOC chamber on the Middle East, on Syria chemical. We will do it again in the open, like we did it last month. Izumi Nakamitsu will brief us, and we are planning an additional briefer on whom we hope to inform the Council shortly. The 6th of October will be a briefing on MONUSCO, DRC, through a VTC in the afternoon. Then we have a break on the 7th. On the 8th, we have MINUSMA, hopefully in the chamber of the Security Council. Given the recent developments in Mali, that briefing will be particularly interesting. 20th of October, we have a dialogue with the troop contributing countries through a VTC. On the 13th, an in-person meeting on the Great Lakes region with Special Envoy Juan Sia briefing us. October 14th marks consultations on MINURSO with ASG Bintou Keita and SRSG Corin Stewart as briefers. And in the morning, we are planning to have a meeting in the chamber and briefing and consultations on Colombia with SRSG Carlos Massieu. October 15 is the adoption of resolution on Haiti, also in the chamber, followed by a briefing on Yemen by Martin Griffiths and Mark Lowcock. 20th, no, not yet 20th. 19th, Monday, briefing on MINUSCA with SRSG NDI, as well as African Union and European Union briefing us on it. Now coming to 20th, which is the first signature event of the Russian presidency under the title Maintenance of International Peace and Security, Comprehensive Review of the Situation in the Gulf region. You are all very well aware what was happening, what were the developments recently in and around the region. We are aiming for a pragmatic exchange of views, for a pragmatic dialogue on how to build regional security for all in that region, in the short and in the long-term perspective. We are inviting Secretary General to brief us, as well as the Gulf countries to speak in the meeting. And for the reasons I described before, that will be a VTC meeting. 21st will be a VTC meeting on UNMIC, UN mission in Kosovo. 22nd, an in-person meeting on UNISFA, Sudan, South Sudan. 26th, open debate on the Middle East through the VTC. 27th, in the morning, we have a briefing and consultations on Syria. This time we proposed to combine both political and humanitarian, on the understanding that if certain developments would justify or require it, we will separate the two. 28th, a private meeting with the ICJ President Yusuf. And in the afternoon, a meeting on an adoption of a resolution on MINURSA, followed by two briefings on Somalia and Lebanon, consultations on resolutions and sanctions on Somalia, and resolution on Lebanon. 29th is the last day, practically the last day of our presidency, with the second signature event on women, open debate on women, peace and security, which marks the 20th anniversary of adoption of Security Council Resolution 1325. That topic attracts great attention of my colleagues in the Security Council, as well as the larger membership. I just had briefing for the UN member states, and all of them, all who spoke, took up the subject, saying how important it is, citing the lack of progress in the implementation of the resolution and the need to take extra efforts to ensure such implementation. We envisage a draft resolution, a resolution on the issue, a short one and non-controversial, confirming the provisions of 1325 and paving the way forward. We're inviting Secretary General to brief us, and I'm sure he will eagerly brief us on the subject, being a great champion on gender. Of course, the executive director of the UN Women will be there, as well as a woman peacekeeper and the representative of the civil society. Again, given that that will be a high-level event and many leaders and ministers would like to speak, we will have to organize it through a VTC. Finally, on the 30th, we'll have a traditional so-called Toledo formula briefing for the member states on the occasion of the end of our presidency. So that ends my hopefully short presentation of our program.
Thank you, Ambassador. Dear colleagues, you all know how hybrid system works. I only would like to encourage you to turn on your cameras so that moderator could easily define who is speaking. Please use the chat to ask for the floor. We'll take our first question from the room. Valeria, head of ANCA, please.
Thank you, Ambassador. And it's a great pleasure to see you in person here. So I have two questions, if I may. The first one is on Nagorno-Karabakh. After the joint statement from Presidents Putin, Trump, and Macron, there are any discussions in the Security Council to hold a meeting on the situation? And the second one is on Libya. Some sources say that Mr. Mladenov is the most likely choice as a new special envoy. If you can confirm, and in any case, if there are progress on the appointments, is a long time.
Thank you, Valeria. On Nagorno-Karabakh, you know that it was not me. On Nagorno-Karabakh, as you know, the Council had an AOB earlier this week, and came up with press elements that were drafted by the three co-chairs of the Minsk group. That was quite a strong statement calling for the obvious, expressing concern, calling for an immediate ceasefire, and calling for negotiations through the offices of the Minsk group. Today, as you know, the presidents of the co-chairs came up with their own statement, which takes the issue at the next higher level, testifying how serious they consider and treat the developments. I hope this will take an effect on the conflicting parties. We hear various statements coming from the region. When we were speaking in the AOB, I will betray you a little secret, we were saying in the end of our statement that of course the Minsk group is a means to facilitate it. The only established format that is to help the parties come to a settlement, and the Minsk group is ready to facilitate. But one important condition for the success of the Minsk group facilitation is the political will of the parties themselves. Unfortunately, so far, we hear certain statements, I will not be calling names, but which testify that we are not there yet, I would say. I hope that the joint statement by the presidents of the Minsk group will be a game changer in the situation. On Libya appointment of the SRSG, now we are talking about the special envoy, not the SRSG as we used to have in the name of Ghassan Salame. Indeed, the appointment is long time overdue. All council members recognize it. Consultations continue. Yes, we hear a few names floating around, but I cannot comment on that because this or another name or whatever name has not been put forward officially. But we hope we will be able to finally finish the saga as soon as we can.
Thank you, Ambassador. James, you are the next. James Bays, Al Jazeera.
James Bays, Al Jazeera. Ambassador, thank you for doing this. It's a follow-up on Libya, actually. Two parts to my question. One, yes, you've got a renewal taking place soon, but you're not actually having a proper meeting on Libya, and yet the diplomacy on Libya right now is getting pretty frantic. I mean, there's talk of talks in Geneva and whatever. So why no council meeting given things are moving very fast? And the second and hard part of my question probably for you, what action should the council take on the latest panel of experts report on Libya, because it details widespread allegations of breaches of the arms embargo. You've read it, I'm sure. They include by Russia. It shows Russia's operating an air bridge from Russia to Syria to eastern Libya. It has details of Russian support for the Wagner Group, and it annexes with lists of flights, 338 Russian flights. So your reaction, please.
On the meeting on Libya, indeed, there are a few efforts going on as we speak, basically. There are some moments of hope, I would say. There are statements which provide for getting out of impasse, statements hinting at leveling the playing ground in order to move forward politically. Again, I will not call names, but you know what I mean. There are efforts by various players to put the parties at the table, and there are actually meetings between the parties in various parts of the region and elsewhere. You know that I think Germany, as recently as yesterday, proposed to hold a meeting on Libya on the 5th of October as a follow-up to the Berlin conference. It's not under the auspices of the Security Council, but that goes in the same direction. We had a meeting on Libya last month with acting SRSG Williams. This mandate cycle this month does not provide for it, but of course, if the situation warrants, we can always convene one. Let's see how things will develop. As I said, there are some moves that give us some light of hope, I would say. Now, what regards the report of the expert group, we discussed it in the council in consultations called by the chair of the sanctions committee, where that chair brought up the issue to the members of the council, citing us not agreeing to the publishing of the so-called interim report of the expert group. There are a few reasons why we refused to go along with that idea. First, it creates a precedent. There are no precedents of interim reports of expert groups. Secondly, we challenge the conclusions of this expert group, which they derive from the open press, and which are, to a large extent, allegations that can be easily challenged, which were saying at many of the Security Councils of meetings on Libya. Thirdly, I raised also a question of the leakage. The leaks of the reports of the Sanctions Committee's expert group is unfortunately a perennial problem in the UN. We've been raising it. We had that in the DPRK Sanctions Committee. We had it in Libya. We had it elsewhere. We are raising that subject constantly, asking to put a stop to this practice, and we have reasons to believe that it is not done just accidentally. It is deliberate leakage, which is aimed at promoting certain political purposes. Now, on the Russian presence in Libya, we've been commenting that many times over. We were saying that there are no Russian military in Libya, whilst we know, and we said it in the Council in the open, we know that the countries that accuse us of the military presence have their own military presence in Libya, not just the private military companies, but the military. We know exactly. We know it exactly. We know the numbers. We know where they are. We know what they are doing. But we are not in a habit of putting in jeopardy other military personnel. We are not saying that openly. We are somehow holding maintain the code of conduct that should be maintained in these circumstances. Unlike our partners, which at every opportunity are raising an issue of the Russian military presence in Libya and of the Russian planes, etc., it has never been proved despite what is contained in the report.
Thank you, Ambassador. Let's connect our online participants of our press conference, Betel Yuyuk, Anadolu Agency.
Thank you, Theodore. Thank you, Ambassador, for the press conference. I could have been in the room. I'm actually here at the UN, but the room is full. I have to ask my question from the fourth floor. If I may take you back to the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia. It's been less than a week since the clashes began between the two countries, and we have already seen more than 100 people, including civilians, killed. Russia has obviously called for an immediate stop to the fighting, as well as the Security Council. But there is also a UN General Assembly resolution which calls on Armenia for an immediate, complete, and unconditional withdrawal from the occupied territories in Azerbaijan. And under international law, Armenian forces are the forces of occupation. I'm just wondering if Russia would make the same call on Armenia to withdraw its forces from Azerbaijan. Thank you.
Look, the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh is a matter of utmost concern to us. Not because it is very close from our borders, but primarily because both Armenia and Azerbaijan are not countries which are strange to us, and these are not peoples that are strange to us. They are, we have, I would not call it even good, but we have special relations with both countries. And of course, to look at what is happening for us, it's a pain. It's a pain. You know, there are no easy solutions to any of the conflicts where the escalation and the feelings are so deep about it on both sides. In fact, I would say that you know you cannot expect a complete implementation of UN General Assembly resolution in the midst of the conflict, which is fraught with large-scale military activities, which with the heavy toll and heavy loss of life, with the degree of rhetoric that comes on both sides. This conflict has been debated for many years now, and there were approaches to resolve it through the Minsk group and on a bilateral basis, which would lead to the sustainable settlement. Unfortunately, at a certain time, these proposals, which were very near to be accepted, were not accepted. And now we are having what we are having. I think that the first and foremost need today is to cease hostilities, to immediately do the ceasefire and re-engage in negotiations. We offered our mediation. Minister Lavrov said that we are ready to provide Moscow as a platform for the parties to discuss it, but you cannot discuss anything, any settlement in the middle of heavy fighting. First, we have to achieve the ceasefire. That's, I think, the priority number one.
Thank you, Ambassador. Next, Pamela Falk, CBS.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. It's Pamela from CBS. And thank you for the briefing. I apologize for not having video. Just recently, your country used a new nuclear-powered icebreaker as proof that the Arctic belongs to Russia as part of an interest in establishing the region for Northern Passage. Could you speak to Russia and the interest in the Arctic?
An unusual question, frankly. Thank you, Pamela. You are really testing me. Look, we never said that the Arctic.
And is it on the Security Council agenda?
I think we never said that Arctic belongs to Russia. Arctic, first of all, belongs to the mankind, as we all are one mankind. But also, Arctic is an area of cooperation of the riparian states primarily. First of all, riparian states. We are saying that Arctic should be an area of cooperation, not confrontation. That's our long-standing position on it, and for a long time it has been shared by the riparian states. We do not want any military build-up or activity in Arctic. We don't want it to become another arena of confrontation. Yes, we are counting, and look, the northern Arctic seaway was always a part of the Russian economy, so to say. We've been using it in the Soviet times, so with our atomic icebreakers even then. Now it's just a new level of icebreakers. But the Arctic is in interest not just to Russia or the riparian states, to the United States, Canada, Norway, and others, but to the countries which are, if you look at the map, are quite away from Arctic. I know that South Korea, for example, or Japan are interested in the northern passage because it's a shorter route compared to the regular one across Africa or through the Suez Channel. So I do not believe that we want to privatize the Arctic. I think that Arctic should be an area of mutual and fruitful cooperation for all.
Thank you. Nizar Aboud is the next.
Thank you.
Hello, do you hear me? Okay. My question is regarding Syria. The chemical weapons issue has been discussed recently in the Area Formula meeting. And obviously there were a lot of discord among Security Council members and also among the experts regarding the authenticity of the reports brought up by the OPCW. How are you going to tackle this coming meeting in the Security Council, given that you wanted to put an end to this saga, as you described earlier, about the chemical file or dossier in Syria?
Thank you for the question. This saga, unfortunately, was not finished with the Area Formula meeting, and it will not be finished on Monday when we discuss chemical Syria. This file is a very useful tool that some of our partners and colleagues are using to corner the Syrian government. For a long time, we've been discussing chemical Syria behind closed doors, and our position was basically not heard. And last month, we offered that we stop doing that behind closed doors because we have nothing to hide in that file. On the contrary, we have a lot to offer and a lot to discuss. During that Area Formula, by the way, a couple of delegations accused Russia of of not taking a part in the discussion with the Director General Arias and the chair of that illegal IIT group that took place earlier this year. I forgot what month it was, maybe May. And I said the reason for that was that we wanted that discussion to be in the open. We wanted to ask questions to Director General Arias about the malpractices of the OPCW, which had already long time become the talk of the town, which they discard and discharge and neglect all our questions to them on the malpractices that are so obvious. But the organizers of the meeting preferred to hide Director General Arias from us and from the questions which he otherwise would have to answer in front of the international community. And that was the reason why we didn't participate in that meeting. The ARIA formula, you said the discord among the member states and discord among the briefers. There was no discord among the briefers. The briefers were quite accorded, I would say. They came up with facts. They came up with scientific analysis. That's something that we are calling our partners long time for, but we are being denied it, saying that we have a stamp of the IIT, we have a stamp of the FFM, we have a stamp of the OPCW, the most reputable, the most professional, unchallengeable organization. And we don't need any of your comments on the conclusions that OPCW reached, and OPCW reached unequivocal and undisputable conclusions that it was the Syrian government that was responsible for the chemical attacks wherever, Khan Sheikhun, Duma, Al-Latamna, and elsewhere. And of course, look, you say you heard the discord. Of course, our Western colleagues, they accused us of the Russian propaganda stunt, but I think they were doing their propaganda, because I heard the same statements that I hear all the time when we discuss chemical Syria. That was summed up by Professor Postel, who said, if you came here, argue with my arguments. Don't tell me your position that you repeated the Security Council. I presented you with arguments. If you have with what to challenge them, challenge them. But don't say that I came to you to indoctrinate you. Unfortunately, they don't want to hear the truth, and those who don't want to hear, they won't listen. You heard Jan Henderson speak, who was presented by the OPCW as some insignificant minor figure who never participated in anything substantive or serious. I think that his presentation spoke for itself. He is a serious man. He is a reputable scientist. He is a respectable specialist that spent decades in the OPCW. And he was very careful. He was saying that I'm here not to criticize my experts and my fellow experts for whom I have the greatest respect, but he named a few things which are happening today in the OPCW, which is a matter of a great concern to us and to many other delegations. OPCW, from a non-politicized, consensual body, which is supposed to work for the prevention of the use of the chemical weapons, which is a weapon of mass destruction, and which cannot be used anywhere under any circumstances and by anybody, became a tool to implicate certain governments through the chemical file. And that's what we are trying to claim. And I think that the impression that was made by the experts in that regard was unequivocal.
Okay, Michelle Nichols from Reuters. Then we'll take a couple of questions from the room.
Hi, Ambassador. Thanks so much for the briefing. Wanted to ask you about a letter sent to you by sent to the Security Council by 5 of your colleagues, the Europeans and the UK, saying that the poisoning of Navalny is a threat to international peace and security, and asking Russia to report to the Security Council on it. Could we get some comment from you on that, please? Thank you.
Look, I'm not a spokesman on Navalny, of course, on Navalny case. But I think that instead of drafting letters that we saw yesterday, which they hurried to draft before the Niger presidency expired, and send it on the 30th of September, they should have better, some of them, cooperate with the Russian authorities. We sent, I think, 3 already requests, our Prosecutor General's office, on the request for legal assistance to Germany, and I think 1 to France, to which we received no reply yet. In fact, we hear conflicting messages on it. We are being sent to the OPCW. OPCW was also playing a game on that, saying to us when we approached it that had nothing to do with it, and they did not cooperate with anybody, and nobody asked them about anything, while they were, in fact, at that time already engaging with the German authorities. We are saying a simple thing: if you have facts, present them. They deny it, and that reminds us of the situation which happened in 2018 with Skripals. The allegations that I hear from some of them are simply absurd. We are saying from the very beginning, we were saying from the very beginning that we are willing to cooperate, that in order to start our investigation, we need, according to our laws, to be provided with materials that would allow us to open such investigation. As long as these materials are not provided, we only can conduct the so-called pre-investigation, which is being held. We hear a lot of things around it. Today, Navalny commented that he's convinced that it's Putin who is behind this. He has no other version. I mean, I'm not even taking the question of why Putin would need it. I mean, that's absurd in principle. But I would say that even the allegation, something like that, which comes not just from Navalny, but is somehow inherently in many statements that we hear on that issue, is insulting. I mean, that is immoral even to suggest this, let alone a simple question: why Russia or the Russian authorities would need that? So that's all I can answer to that question, and I would recommend my colleagues who wrote the letter, instead of telling us to brief the Security Council, first to fulfill and implement what is necessary and what is incumbent on them, and that is to provide the reply to the request and to the request of our Prosecutor General to provide information on the case.
Thank you. Edith Lederer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Very nice to see you here. I have a question about Russia's relationship at the moment with Turkey. You've certainly worked together on the Astana process on Syria, but you're now on opposing sides in both the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and in Libya. And I wonder how you would assess the state of relations. Has President Putin talked to President Erdogan, or Minister Lavrov talked to his counterpart? What are you trying to do to sort of tamp down and try and reduce or end these conflicts, because the relationship between your two countries is critical.
Thank you, Edith. May I correct you a little bit? You said that we are on opposing sides with Turkey on Nagorno-Karabakh. Yes, Turkey is unequivocally supporting Azerbaijan. We know that, but it doesn't mean that we are on the other side supporting Armenia vis-a-vis Azerbaijan. That's not the case. We support the just settlement. We support the ceasefire. We support the end of hostilities. We want both countries to stop this escalation, and that's what we are supporting, and we are trying to work on it. To which there is a proof, political one. I was telling you about that earlier. We are cooperating with Turkey on many issues. Indeed, one of the most important things is our trilateral cooperation on Syria within the Astana format, which bore fruit on many aspects of the Syrian file. Look, life is not a linear thing. Life is a complex exercise. And of course, we have to realize that various countries has various interests. Some of these interests may not coincide, but the issue of the art of diplomacy and the art of political relations is to find such combinations and such compromises that would marry the unmarriable and merge the differences, and then find such compromises that would be beneficial for the situation on the ground here and there. We are working with Turkey on Syria. We are working with Turkey on Libya. We are in discussions with them on that issue for the sake of the settlement, first of all, of halting of a non-renewal of military activities in that country, which would be a prerequisite to finding a political solution for the benefit of all Libyans, which, as we said in the beginning, had some sort of a start in recent weeks. Yes, indeed, Putin talks regularly to Erdogan, and Lavrov talks all the time to Çavuşoğlu. We are saying openly that we think that internationalizing the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict will not help, will only escalate the situation, and we're calling upon all parties to show maximum restraint, and work for the de-escalation.
Carlos Steyer, please. Would you use a mic?
Sorry. Ambassador, Dr. Key Park, neurosurgeon, who's the director of the Korea Project at Harvard University, has offered to address the Security Council on the horrific consequences to the civilians in North Korea of the sanctions. And it would be very interesting for members of the Security Council who are advocating the sanctions against North Korea to see the horrific human consequences of this. And what are the chances of Dr. Park, who is a very, very distinguished neurosurgeon, done a lot of work in North Korea, and director of Harvard's Korea Project, what are the chances of him being invited to address the Security Council so they could hear directly what the consequences of the very self-righteous sanctions are?
We have been raising that issue for a long time. And we've been calling on the chair of the Sanctions Committee on DPRK to hold a briefing, initially by OCHA, on the humanitarian consequences of sanctions, which for various reasons, one or another, were postponed and postponed. So we have a debt that we want to be repaid, and I hope that we will be able to organize such a briefing for the members of the Security Council shortly. We will be working on that. Whether we are able to invite this or another individual to brief us on that particular issue, who is not a member of the expert committee or not a part of the UN Secretariat, that's a question. I also had, I was approached by one scientist who is not strange to this problem, who is very familiar with it, and he cannot be suspected to be biased in any way. He is just saying that the situation is appalling, and indeed it is so. We always have been saying that we have to separate the political part from the humanitarian one and from the humane one as well. I will approach the chair of the Sanctions Committee, telling him that that there is a reputed neurosurgeon who would like to speak or at least to present his views on the situation, on the humanitarian situation and the humanitarian effect of the sanctions on DPRK. In what form it will be done, if at all, I will tell you later. Provide me with his coordinates, and I will try to connect them. The humanitarian consequences of sanctions is not an issue just of the DPRK. We are raising that issue in relation to many conflicts that we are discussing, saying that it adds a tremendous amount of toll on the general population, in particular in Syria, with all these recent acts that have been adopted. To that, our partners are trying to convince us that the sanctions are very targeted, very fine, and they would they are aimed exactly at the violators and at the individuals, not at the Syrian people. The Syrian people will not in any way be affected, but that is disapproved by the facts. It is disproved by the humanitarian actors that are working in Syria, including Western NGOs, who are saying that they themselves are victims of those sanctions because of their secondary effects, when many humanitarian providers are refusing to work with them and on the territory of Syria because of the fear of retaliation by the sanction watchdogs in the Western countries that introduced them. So that's a generic issue, in fact, and this is an issue which is being more often and often raised in the Council, not just by the countries affected by these sanctions, but by the countries who believe that this is unacceptable. The Secretary General, as you remember, in his call initially for the global ceasefire, he called for the lifting of the unilateral sanctions. That was reflected in the resolution by the Council on the ceasefire, where we recognized the call of the Secretary General. Recently, General Assembly adopted the so-called omnibus resolution on COVID-19, where by voting, yes, but by the majority of the UN member states, a paragraph from the 2030 agenda on the adverse effect of the unilateral sanctions measures became a part of that resolution. This is an issue which should be addressed, and we're addressing it all the time.
Lenka White, please.
Thank you, Ambassador, for this briefing. My question is on your event on Persian Gulf. What outcome do you expect, if any, and are you planning on discussing further snapback or JCPOA? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. No outcome is envisaged. And the reason for that is very simple. We know how diverging the views are, and to claim or to hope for any outcome is not the aim of the whole exercise. The exercise is to discuss in a frank manner, without cornering anyone, without pointing fingers, without exposing anyone, what can we do to alleviate the situation, to alleviate tensions, to go to the de-escalation. You know that Iran is a usual suspect for many, including in the region. Everybody is pointing finger at the malign Iran behavior. You know what that the U.S. is exercising the policy of maximum pressure on Iran, but somehow what is being neglected and forgotten, that Iran has also its own security concerns, which they say, but which are often ignored. Iran has its own concerns, Saudi Arabia has its own concerns, other Gulf countries have their concerns, the Greater Middle East have their concerns. So the question is how to ensure such an architecture in the region that would guarantee regional security, that would guarantee no need for the arms buildup by any country, how to guarantee the kind of the OSCE type process in the region, and the instruments, the instrument that would ensure such security. And these instruments can be copied from the agreements that have been reached a long time ago, including the Soviet American agreements on non-use of force, on the prevention of accidents, etc. There is a plenty, a list of those agreements that could be useful if we apply them in the context of the Persian Gulf situation. On the snapback, I think everything is clear. The snapback has not happened. The Council spoke about it unequivocally. Nearly all Council members sent letters to the President of the Council in August, stating their position on the so-called snapback, saying that they do not share that, and they believe that the resolution 2231 stays intact. That was confirmed in the presidential resume of the discussion in the end of August during the Indonesian presidency, and later confirmed by the Nigerian presidency. After the so-called snapback grace period, these 30 days expired on the 19th of September, and US announced that the snapback now is in force. The same countries confirmed their position, sending letters to the Security Council President and to the Secretary General, saying that in their view, the snapback is the American wishful thinking. So we live in a situation of a no snapback, of the full implementation of Resolution 2231, and I understand that the US themselves understand it. They simply use that situation in order to go with their own unilateral sanctions to impose on Iran, to continue their policy of maximum pressure on that country.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think we'll turn to our online participants. Maria Khrenova, TASS Agency.
Thank you, Taylor. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador. So I actually have a short follow-up on the Council's program. You mentioned that there will be a VTC debate because some high-level speakers can join. So and we expect some high-level speakers from Russia, like Mr. Lavrov, during this month. And also on the meeting on chemical weapons. Last time it turned out to be more about Navalny than Syria. Do you expect it to happen again, especially as it's open meeting?
On the high-level participation, there is uncertainty about high-level participation or any participation of the delegates coming from their own countries. You know that New York maintains this two-week quarantine, which limits, of course, the possibilities for meaningful participation, especially high level, because if we proceed from the fact that high level visitors are not exempted and they have to stay here 2 weeks before they can go to a meeting, I think it's unrealistic to believe that any of them would be willing to come. Although if that quarantine was lifted, I easily allow for Minister Lavrov to come in person, say for a meeting on the 20th. We would welcome such an opportunity. I'm always happy to see Minister Lavrov here. Whether it's a reality and whether it's realistic, it's a big question now. That is why we have to organize our meetings with the high-level participations through the VTCs. It's the easiest way, and that's the format that we ourselves envisaged when we negotiated the way how we will operate in the Council during this lockout months and during this period of the VTCs. And VTCs was the only option for us for many months. And that does not provide for the statement from the screen in the Council. That was the rules that we adopted for ourselves, and I think we should follow them. As we agreed. Look, I don't think that during the last chemical weapons we had a discussion on Navalny against of chemical Syria. Yes, a few countries raised that subject. Well, I cannot, cut off their microphones if they raise it again at chemical Syria. That's they are right. Although I don't see the link between chemical Syria and the Navalny case. But in chemical Syria, we are planning to discuss chemical Syria.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Sorry,
Maria.
Sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean that. I understand that it would be difficult to come to New York in person. I meant, could Mr. Lavrov join the meeting via VTC?
Well, I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. I think he will deliver a much more powerful statement than any that I can do.
Majid Gley.
Thank you very much. Right here, so I'm going to stand up. Thank you, Ambassador. I want to ask about Iraq. There are major developments right now in Iraq due to the intensification of attacks by the militias against the U.S. targets in Iraq. Now the United States says we will close our embassy in Baghdad. The Iraqi government fears this move means the decrease or the end of the U.S. or coalition forces that are essential to fight ISIS in Iraq. Do you think withdrawal of the U.S. forces or the decrease of the role of the coalition in Iraq is a positive move? Do you agree with your Iranian colleagues when they say the U.S. and coalition should leave Iraq. Their role is over. The fight against ISIS is pretty much done.
Look, to decide whether U.S. Troops should remain in Iraq or should withdraw from Iraq is not for me. It's for the Iraqi government, first of all. And if Iraqi government decides that the U.S. troops should leave, I think that they should leave. That's the way how things go normal in international relations. Whether the Iraqi government is interested that the U.S. troops leave, that's another question. How it will affect the fight with ISIS, that's also a big question. But the situation in Iraq differs from the situation in Syria, a nearby country, where we also have the presence of the U.S. troops, which came there without consulting the Syrian government, to put it mildly, and are stated on the Syrian soil illegally. Let's be frank about it. We do not shy away from saying that openly, and we are saying openly that the U.S. troops should leave Syria. In our view, the sooner the better. It will only facilitate the Syrian reconciliation. Americans may think otherwise, but well, that's their right. But we think that leaving Syria by the American troops will be conducive, will be positive for the Syrian settlement, not negative.
Just one follow-up on that, Ambassador. And aren't you concerned? I know the decision you said is leaving for Iraqi government, but aren't you concerned that a potential withdrawal of the coalition could strengthen ISIS in the region? What is the Russians' view on this?
Look, we know that ISIS has been largely destroyed, but not completely. We know that there are many sleeping cells around. Besides, it had been destroyed physically, but it has not been destroyed mentally. And in what way it may reappear, that's a big question. And of course, it is a concern to us. To what extent the presence of US troops in Iraq is absolutely indispensable and instrumental in fighting ISIS, I cannot say. I'm not an expert on this. But of course, the issue of ISIS revival, both in Iraq and Syria, is a matter of concern, including for the Iraqi authorities. But Iraqi authorities are the masters of their own country. They should assess the risks. They should take informed decisions. They should be fully aware that if foreign troops that were invited there, which are there on certain conditions and terms, are leaving, that they are capable to uphold and to take that fight on their own, and that this fight is successful. Of course, we do not want the resurgence of ISIL anywhere, including in Iraq. Iraq deserves to be given an opportunity to develop peacefully. Iraq has been progressing recently. Iraq came out of a terrible situation after 2003. Iraq has established good neighborly relations with the countries around him. It maintains this policy of no enemies around, only friends. We are a friend of Iraq, and we have good relations with that country, and we wish it all the best, and to overcome whatever difficulties they are experiencing.
Ambassador, I think as usually, we've done more than an hour. I think it's time for two last questions. We have many respected media on the line. First of all, is Ali Barada, who will be the next. Yeah, and next question, maybe Ambassador will choose himself. So, Ali Barada.
Thank you, Fedor. Thank you, Ambassador, for doing this. My question is about Lebanon and Syria and Israel. It's one interconnected question. So given the hard situation in Lebanon, does Russia support now the withdrawal of Hezbollah fighters from Syria? Does Russia support the demarcation, the agreement between Lebanon and Israel to do the demarcation for the maritime border and the land border? And there were also signaling from Syria that they are willing to have peace talks now with Israel. Please let us know in your national capacity, what do you think about those issues and whether any of those issues is going to be discussed in the Security Council? Thank you.
Look, whoever is present in Syria, it's a matter between those present and the Syrian government. We were not inviting anyone to Syria. It is not our business. We were invited ourselves, and we can speak for ourselves only. What the Syrian government decides on the presence of other parties that it invited to Syria to help fight international terrorism, that's the sovereign right of the Syrian government. So for me to comment how I treat a potential withdrawal of certain contingents from Syria anywhere, I mean, is simply not appropriate. Those who were invited to help Syria fight ISIL made a big contribution to that. Out of countries that were invited officially and legally, Russia and Iran. That's no secret. We are there on the request of the Syrian government, which make our presence there legal, and it was necessary. I mean, I will not be citing what we did in Syria since 2015, but we were instrumental very much in breaking the bone of ISIL, as well as Iran, by the way, and of course the Syrian Arab Army. Now we would welcome any agreement reached, mutually acceptable agreement reached by Lebanon between Lebanon and Israel on demarcation, provided that is agreement that both sides agreed to. On the willingness of Syria for talks with Israel, frankly, I didn't hear anything, and I cannot comment it. I doubt. I mean, I need to know what the source is and what we are talking about. I haven't heard about it, and it's difficult for me to comment on it. What kind of talks? Talks on what? On which issues? Very unclear to me as of yet. We are discussing issues in the triangle, one way or the other, practically at every meeting on Syria, and when we discuss Lebanon. Lebanon is a special issue today after what happened there recently, that terrible explosion that made such a blow on a country which already suffered from many crises. And it continues to be in a political crisis. And we want them to be out of it as soon as possible, but we understand what difficulties they are facing today. The Lebanese society, as you know better than me, is a very complex one, multifaceted, and you cannot solve Lebanese problems by appointing one party at the expense of the other. Lebanon is always a balance of interests of all factions that exist there. The whole country is an example of a very delicate balance of how the political system works there. That's a beautiful and great country, but you have to take into account all political voices there and not try to exclude a political force that is part of the Lebanese political landscape from the country political life.
Are you mentioning here the Macron initiative, Ambassador? Can you clarify, please?
No, I was not. I was saying that I was not referring to Macron initiative. I was saying that Lebanon is in politically in a very difficult situation, in a turmoil, with the government, with the devastation that occurred in the port, and with the socio-economic effects on the country. And I said that I wish them to overcome it. The sooner the better.
Thank you, Ali. So, Ambassador, maybe the last question by Abdelhamid Siam about the Palestine.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you for giving me the last question. And I want to ask first about the quartet. Russia is a member of the quartet. The quartet is almost sleeping for the last 4 years. The last statement it issued, a comprehensive statement, was in 2016. Why does not Russia activate the quartet and see what they can do about the question of Palestine? Why Russia is playing just a secondary role in the quartet and wait for, if the Americans agree to meet, they do meet. If they don't, then there is no meeting. So can't Russia play a more proactive role in this field? My second question, and I'll be brief. Can I ask one more question?
Ambassador?
Yeah.
Go on.
Okay. Just fast. There are 4 resolutions adopted in 1993 regarding Nagorno-Karabakh: 822, 853, 874, 884. And they clearly ask Armenian forces to withdraw from land they occupied in Azerbaijan. Are these Security Council resolutions are still valid, and the international community should abide by what these resolutions spell out clearly? Thank you.
On the quartet, thank you for the encouragement. But in fact, we are forcefully trying to turn quartet back into the game. In particular, for your information, we were proposing to hold a quartet ministerial level meeting during the high level week. I spoke to the Secretary General, who was also keenly interested. That was not possible to make for reasons which are obvious to you, I think. We are saying that the quartet is a mechanism that proved its efficiency in the past, and it should be used now when we are in dire straits on the Palestinian-Israeli settlement. We are saying that the quartet should be supplemented, maybe, the dialogue in the quartet, supplemented by the participation of certain countries from the League of Arab States. We are willing to consider this. We are ready to engage them in that dialogue. We are saying that unilateral solutions will not solve the issue. We hear all the time that we live in a new world, we live in new circumstances, we live in a new situation. We should abandon the outdated paradigms that do not work, those UN General Assembly and Security Council resolutions that we adopted long time, that what we say constitutes the international parameters of the just settlement. To that I was saying to my colleagues recently that if this is the case, how about a resolution of the UN General Assembly creating the State of Israel, which is also part of that paradigm. Shall we forget about it either? I mean, we and the majority of the international community stands unequivocally besides the agreed international base for the Israeli-Palestinian settlement, which includes, of course, the Madrid Principles and the Arab Initiative and the capital and the two-state solution. We encourage our Palestinian friends to go into negotiations with Israel, direct negotiations with Israel without preconditions. And we are saying, like others, that we will accept everything that will be negotiated by them directly, whatever will be acceptable to both of them. But we do not accept that solutions are being proposed which are acceptable only to one side, clearly unacceptable to the other, but still are promoted as a way forward. We are trying to help to reconcile the Palestinian factions. We saw some positive moves recently on that road. We are planning, and I think already announced, that we would like to see both factions, the main factions in Palestine, in Moscow, for another round of talks. On the quartet, coming back to the quartet, I must tell you that as recently as on the 29th of September, which is the day before today, before yesterday, quartet held a meeting with Mladenov presiding, with the participation of the representatives of their countries of their ministries, of the foreign ministries on the Middle East, with the participation of Vlad Safrankov, who is now a representative of for Russian foreign minister on the Middle settlement. It was, I think, Terstal from EU, Mladenov himself, and Avi Berkovits from the office of Jared Kushner. So there was a meeting. The quartet is alive. It's not no fanfare on the quartet yet, but we are trying to engage quartet forcefully and as much as we can, and we think that it can play an effective role in the current circumstances in particular. What was it? The next one. I think I answered that question already. That there are resolutions, yes, but who remembers resolutions in the midst? I mean, the warring parties in the midst of the hostilities. Before we discuss the settlement, you know, the resolutions were adopted in 1993. Many things happened since then. As I said, there were proposals that were where we were very close to finding a solution. It is only a regret, a great regret, that we could not achieve it then. From where we will go in these circumstances, I cannot give you an answer. But I think that before we think about it, the most important thing is to cease hostilities. I saw someone on the screen who was waving, but further was not. Yes, on the right, a lady. Who is this? Further.
I don't see it correctly on the screen. Yeah, give me a second. Sylvian. Okay, so we can.
Can I take
you can go on. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Again, on Lebanon, on the framework agreement for Israeli-Lebanese maritime discussions, It's an historic agreement between the two parties. What is the Russian reaction to this particular agreement? Do you think it's time for hope to a future peace between the two countries, Lebanon and Israel? And also, can we have more details on the resolution on Lebanon that will be discussed at the end of this month? Thank you.
On the details of the resolution, we will provide you later. We have the country that is the pen holder of that file, and I think it will be appropriate, more appropriate for them to comment on the resolution. That will come later in the month, and I think that will be appropriate to comment on it a bit later. But regarding the agreement between Lebanon and Israel, we are glad that it took place. It's not a comprehensive agreement, but this is something already, and that is good. We are wholeheartedly for the improvement of relations in the region, including between Israel and Arab countries. The question is, it's not related to Lebanon here in particular, but still the question is that these rapprochement, these agreements that we witness, should not come at the expense of the Palestinians, which is an issue which the Palestinians themselves raise. That is, you know, the Palestinians. There are winners, of course, in these circumstances, but Palestinians should not become losers in this game.
So that's it. Okay, Alan Bulkata, the really last question.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'm hiding over here. I have a question regarding the proposal of President Putin last week. He proposed the Russian vaccine for free to UN staff. So I wonder if you had any feedback from Secretariat and maybe some of the missions already approached to you regarding that. And a little follow-up, if it's possible, on Nagorno-Karabakh. There are several reports stating that Turkey is sending mercenaries to the conflict zone. Does Russia have any confirmation of this data? Thank you.
On the vaccine proposed by President Putin for free for the United Nations, for free is not the key word here. I think that the key word is that he proposed the vaccine. Yes, he proposed it as a humanitarian, kind of humanitarian assistance of Russia to the UN staff. That idea was positively accepted by the Secretariat. I spoke to the Secretary General on that issue. No, not on that issue. I spoke on other issues as well, but that was one of the issues that we discussed. The Secretary General will appoint a focal point here in the United Nations to discuss the whole range of issues around it, because it's, of course, it's not, you know, that simple. We offered, we brought it here, we vaccinated everybody, we go home. There are various things around it, legal, procedural, medical, logistical, etc. That has to be discussed. We've been approached, we talked, we've been instructed from Moscow to continue. We gave the feedback from here with the list of questions that followed after our conversation with the Secretariat. What we are planning, it's a pre-announcement. We just had an idea that maybe it would be a good idea for us to organize a presentation of the Russian vaccine here in the UN by those who developed it. They can brief UN membership and, of course, the media on it, on the clinical trials, which are going full strength now in Russia, on the results, on the effects, on any side effects, on any problems that they. So far, they're saying they encountered no problems. I mean, I'm not advertising here, but I'm just telling you what I hear. on the mercenaries, it was commented today by our foreign ministry spokeswoman, by Maria Zakharova, that indeed we have information about the presence in the zone of conflict of mercenaries coming from Syria. That's all I know. I know it from the reports, from the comment of the Russian spokesperson, as well as from the reports in other media, including the French one, which are saying the same thing. And it does not add, or rather, it is not a very welcome development, I would put it that way. It doesn't help to achieve what we are trying to achieve most at the moment, which is the ceasefire and the end of the hostilities. Thank you very much. I appreciate your braveness. You are here in person, and I also appreciate all those who joined us on the VTC. I will be with you more often now, since I will be in the council, hopefully starting on the 8th quite often. And if you are around, I will try to resume our regular stakeouts that we used to have when everything was normal. Thank you.
We will all
Thank you.
appreciate that greatly.
Thank you, Ambassador.